40 years ago, the African continent was characterized by discussions and agitation for multipartyism and democracy. At that time, many African nations were rooting for the end of dictatorships and single-party rule, ostensibly to give people an opportunity to elect their preferred leaders. At that time, and a few years later, the clarion call was a government of the people, by the people, for the people. In fact, the first multi-party elections in Africa registered significant turnouts. 1997 in Kenya, for instance, at 40%. It went up to 57.1% in 2002 and close to 69% in the year 2007. The international community was heavily involved in the journey of democratization of African nations. At that time, you'll remember, foreign envoys were key participants, together with civil society organizations, the church, even members of academia, university students, were heavy pushers of democratic elections and good governance. Years later, a worrying trend is emerging, where the voter turnout is thinning by the day. I want to cite the recently held Nigerian elections and the August 9th general elections here in Kenya. Nigeria, with a whopping 93.4 million registered voters, had only a paltry 26% turning up to vote. The winning presidential candidate got 8.3 million votes. The second candidate had 6.7 million votes. So in essence, we're saying the president-elect in Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation, will rule with a legal mandate of only 8 million voters, which, by the way, is less than 10% of the registered voters. Let's take a look at the situation back home. President William Ruto garnered 7.1 million votes in last year's election, Raila coming second with 6.9 million votes. Now, the first two candidates cumulatively garnered 13 million votes against registered voters of 22 million. And here's where things get interesting. A whole 8 million plus voters did not turn up to vote. In fact, more people chose not to vote than those that actually did vote for the winning candidate, that's President William Ruto. Now, these are interesting figures on a continent whose population mainly comprises young people. Clearly, something's not working. And we have browbeaten them over and over. We've reminded them of their civic duty. We have told those who don't vote that they lose their right to critique the government. We've said all these things. But still, they don't turn up. In fact, we have variously accused the so-called middle class for not wanting to engage in civic matters. But clearly, something is wrong. You see, this form of democracy that we fought so hard for just isn't working as it used to, or perhaps as we intended. If people are increasingly disinterested in engaging in the process, shouldn't we rethink it altogether? If people are not turning up to vote in their numbers, then is it still a government of the people, for the people, by the people? Clearly, the lectures aren't working. Perhaps, folks, it's time to rethink democracy as we know it. Perhaps we don't need it. Maybe we should go back to the single-party era. I don't know. What I do know is that we need to change the way we do things. Because this low voter turnout that goes lower with every election cycle in Africa cannot surely describe democracy in the way we have always known it. That's my take.